have to offer a disclaimer before I begin this story because I do not want you to think that I am in contention for the Angela's Ashes Family of the Year Award, the downtrodden, penniless, and drunken version. My story begins with my family, which is a decidedly working class, what we would now call in this day and age working poor family. I was raised as an Irish Catholic in the Irish Catholic ghetto. And what that meant in those days was that the O'Neills with their 9 lived over there, and the McConvilles with their 7 lived over there, and the McGilvrys with their 6 lived over here, and the Connollys with their 9 lived over here. And those were the only people you knew. Now, we were a bit of an anomaly because we were the Sheas with our 3. But you see, we were all boys, and I was going to be a priest. And so that raised us to a certain level in that community. My mother did everything that she possibly could to make Christmas the best Christmas that it could possibly be. She spent every ounce of her energy trying to gather money, trying to save money, borrow money, beg money, anything that she could so that we could have the absolute ideal mythic Christmas that she felt we should all have. The strangest thing about my mother's mythical Christmases is that I really only remember 2 Christmases from my childhood. The first one that I remember is the year that my father was baptized as a Catholic. And he was baptized as a Catholic just before Christmas. And it was a really good thing because at Christmas midnight mass, the ushers literally grabbed him and tore him from his pew and pushed him down the aisle towards the communion rail. And I remember my mother saying afterwards, "Oh, thank God that he had been baptized, because it would have been terrible that him, as a Protestant, had committed a mortal sin of sacrilege on the holiest night of the year." But it's not that Christmas that I want to talk to you about. It's the second one that I remember. My father, I was 17, and my father had just had the last and the most recent of his DUIs. He had lost his license, it was suspended, and he had been sentenced to a $500 fine and 90 days in the county jail. And it just turned out that the last 30 of his 90 days, Christmas was going to fall right in the middle of it. My mother felt that it would be absolutely unconscionable for the father of the family to be away from his family at Christmas. But there was no money to pay the $500 fine, and so my father had to go to jail and spend those whatever days that were there to be in jail. But again, my mother to the rescue, saved, borrowed, begged, whatever she could do to get just enough money to get my father out of jail in time for Christmas. And so, on December 23rd, she went up to the county jail, drove an hour and a half to Orangeville, Ontario, got my father out, and drove back. I was thankful that I was not in the car for that drive home, because my mother, at her worst moments, could be a bit of a harpy, and it would not have been a pretty scene. The next morning, my father, his license under suspension, decided that he would go out and pick up a few things. And so he got in my mother's car, Christmas Eve morning, and left. Christmas Eve night, my mother and I and my 2 younger brothers went to midnight mass just the four of us without my father, in my car. My car was still drivable even though it had been the one that was involved in the most recent DUI and had been somewhat damaged. The accident and incident that had landed my father in jail to begin with. After midnight mass, my brothers were sent to bed, and as soon as we knew they were quiet, my mother and I began to put the Christmas presents together. Wrapping, assembling, tagging. This one from this one from so-and-so, this one from so-and-so, and you know what I'm referring to. I was seated in the middle of the floor putting all of the presents together while my mother sat in the corner nursing a bottle of Canadian Club and getting more and more morose and crying quietly. My father returned on Boxing Day. Typical of families like ours, it was a very silent return. Not much was exchanged, no words. It was just as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something had happened to me. I had learned a lesson that night about what it meant to grow up and what it meant to come to an understanding of how our lives were made. You see, those events of our lives, as I've come to learn, they grow us. They grow us into the people that we need to be, or they grow us into the people that we will be. And we begin our lives, our childhood, beginning and believing in Santa Claus. And then, as we grow, we find that Santa Claus looks different than we thought. And as we continue to grow, we find out perhaps that we become the Santa Clauses of our own lives, the Santa Clauses that provide that wonderful world of dreams and joy. What I learned that night, and it has stood me in good stead, was that there would be nothing in my life except what I would choose to put there. That no one would be the grantor of my good, nor would they be the withholder of it. That I would be the one who would create the good for my life and for others. And so I have spent my life trying to do that. And I am reminded of those days and that particular Christmas without any bitterness or anger or resentment. Probably, if anything, with a little bit of sadness. But the lesson that I learned to be the giver of joy for myself and for my brothers and for others settled on me gently that night, very much like the snow falling gently on an Ontario Christmas. Thank you.
Terry Shea.